As I've been reading the stories on this site, I've been thinking about my own experience, and well, here it is. It was the summer of my 10th grade year. Hormones were high, stress was even higher, boys, homework, and the internet. That's what my life was, basically. When summer finally rolled around, I seized the chance I had when both my parents were at work and my brother was at summer reading school. I threw on a light jacket, some hiking boots, and I set out for the woods at the end of my street. To give some background, the woods aren't very big, maybe a half-mile thick with a river between each shore, 5 miles in length. It was my safe haven, and I was always calm when I was there, except for this time. I wish I hadn't gone. I didn't really have a set destination, so I just started walking down the path. I'd gone maybe a mile when I heard footsteps behind me. Naturally, I turned around, only to see 3 burly guys with 2 dogs. I shrugged this off, shot them a smile, and got off the trail so they could pass me. Dog walkers weren't really any cause for alarm, so I shrugged it off. I headed down a handmade trail towards a small fort a few of the neighborhood kids had built. I was walking around the structure and spent about 20 minutes, just enjoying the sunshine and the silence. I heard branches snapping and turned, hoping it was maybe a deer, but instead, I see the same guys, picking their way through the woods from behind me. Mind you, I was staring at the fort, and these guys had taken another path. I watched them for a moment, wondering if maybe they were teaching their dogs something. Again, it wouldn't be the first time this happened around here. Instead, they were staring directly at me. I got up and grabbed my jacket and headed back towards the main path, a red flag going up as I turned to see the 3 guys walking after me. I turned onto the path and took a deep breath. I started at a slow jog, then I wanted to get to the place I knew I could hide. I couldn't go home. They were blocking the path towards my house. I heard them reach the path and then raise their voices in pounding feet. I picked up my pace until I was sprinting down the path. I took a sharp turn and slid down the steep incline and into a place me and my friends used to call the dunes. It was a sand pit bordering the river. I could hear them cursing and howling as they struggled to get down the incline, their dogs growling, and a thought, from who knows where, came to me that if I hid, they could always set their dogs on me and I'd be helpless to protect myself. I turned to my next option, a thick tree that had bridged the river. There was no way they could possibly get their dogs across that. I made a mad dash towards the tree before freezing, weighing my options in a vain hope that they hadn't followed me. But they did. I scrambled up onto the tree and began crawling towards the other shore. I heard shouting and I turned to see the guys still trying to get their dogs onto the log. I landed on the shore and spun, breathing hard. They were shouting curse words at me and one even threatened to kill me. In my stupidity, I had forgotten my cell phone at home. I inwardly cursed. Soon, the guys left with their dogs, and I stayed there until dark, just to make sure they were gone. I don't know what I had done for them to do what they did, and I'm thankful I knew the paths well enough to save my own life. The 3 creepy guys who scared me to death, let's not meet. I'm currently a 20-year-old female, and my great-aunt was 88 when she passed away. I'm not related to my great-aunt by blood. She was my maternal grandmother's brother's wife. They were quite wealthy. He used to be a well-known lawyer, and she had a rich family. And they lived in a large house near one of our capital's old canals. They never had any children. This is in part due to their workaholic lifestyle and love for traveling, but I think there were also some fertility issues because she always wanted her nieces and nephews to come and visit them. My great-uncle had been in feeble health for some years after a couple of ICHs following his retirement, which left him quite quickly tired and a very slow speaker. He was still the most intelligent person I ever met, though. When he eventually died, my aunt became even more clingy, always wanting us to come visit her. So, as for the story, my aunt lived about 2 hours away from us, which might not seem like a lot, but it was the other side of the country for us. I guess a little bit of research will tell you which country I'm in capital with old canals, 2-hour drive from border to border. Hint, it's in Western Europe. So with my parents being busy with work and my siblings, 17 years old, male and female, and me being young and not being very interested in visiting our older relatives at the time, we didn't see our aunt that often. When we did visit, probably once every 2 months or so, boy, she was happy. It always made me feel a bit guilty, but it was not like she didn't have a large social circle. She was quite the socialee. Her old family was old money. She would spoil us children, although we teenagers had to fake our enthusiasm when being gifted jigsaw puzzles and antique books on German grammar. We didn't speak German very well. She would have her cook, who has a cook these days, make elaborate meals, and truth be told, it was always delicious. After dinner, we would all have tea and biscuits in our living room, talking and talking. Things like she had been to the nicest gallery opening last week, how were we doing in school, what university would I go to, would it be in her city? Typical rich old people talk, I guess. My aunt was a little bit obsessed with tea. Her teas would always have these exotic, insanely sweet flavors, and had to be tasted and analyzed thoroughly. Old people antics, no biggie. She was eccentric. If she didn't have money, she would have been called crazy. But hey, rich people are eccentric. We didn't realize the pattern in what would happen next, but now that I look back on it, I can see it. After dinner and tea time, we would get very tired. Not knockout tired, but drowsy nonetheless. Most of the time, my father would still drive us home in the evening, very dangerous in eyesight. But sometimes we'd have to spend the night at my aunt's. It made us even more hesitant to come visit her, but she would call and whine about how lonely she was, etc. We thought our sleepiness was caused by her talking and wanting to know everything about us. She was an emotional leech. If we would spend the night, she was ecstatic and would prepare breakfast in bed for us and try to get us to stay the rest of the day. I remember one time when I was around 14 or 15, my brother became very ill when we were there. We had to spend the night there because my father had a decent amount of wine and my mother was just too tired to drive. We had breakfast, again accompanied by my aunt's tea, and we went to a museum with her while my parents slept for a bit. While watching a painting by our country's greatest painter in the main hall, my brother threw up all over the security fence in front of the painting. I'm talking projectile vomiting. It barely missed the huge painting, and we were quickly escorted to the bathroom by a panicking security guard. My little brother looked awful. Pale as a ghost, throwing up every few minutes, his vomit became clear and a little bloody. The guard suggested that she call an ambulance, but my aunt refused that and took us home. It was a 10-minute walk, and my brother threw up 2 times in the canals, under loud applause of a few drunken British tourists. So we came home, and our parents were obviously very worried. We were all feeling a bit nauseous, so they suggested taking my brother to a doctor. Again, my aunt refused, putting him in her bed and drowning him in blankets and hot water bottles. She said something like, oh, maybe he should stay a few nights to get better. My parents put us all in the car and we drove home. When we got home, my brother was already feeling a lot better, so we didn't see a doctor after that. Now the time came when I finally realized something was wrong. About 2 years ago, we visited my aunt a few days before Christmas. I had just had my tonsils removed, and it hurt like hell. All was fine when we arrived, the usual talking and eating. I didn't eat a lot because swallowing is practically impossible. My aunt insisted I drink some tea, but I couldn't drink anything hot, so I kept telling her no thank you. That evening I stayed remarkably clear despite my pain meds. I could, however, see that my family had become a bit drowsy. They spoke slower and a bit incoherently and complained about being tired at 10 p.m. I thought this was weird, especially because I remained so clear. I chalked it up to me being on edge because of the hunger and not participating in the dull conversations because of the pain I was in. It's only now that I think, if only I had said something. When my aunt died, my scattered family had a little get-together after the funeral to remember her and sharing stories. The being tired and staying over scenario was told quite a bit by my uncle, his wife, my cousin, and my parents. Everyone became a bit uncomfortable, but we thought nothing of it, because hey, she was dead. You couldn't say something like that. Right now, I'm almost 100% sure there was something in that tea. The only time I didn't become sleepy was when I didn't drink her tea, although she kept insisting throughout the evening. I guess she wanted to keep us with her, close to her, after her husband died. I did a bit of research, on Google, these past few days, and I'm pretty sure it was some kind of coping/escape mechanism. Something like Machazin by proxy. I don't really bring it up because, well, she's dead, and I don't even know how to bring it up and make such an unbelievable accusation. It makes me both sad and angry. Sad because she was obviously lonely and wanted her family to be close, but also angry because she took enormous risks doing that and it could have ended very badly. My brother, the children getting the same, possibly spiked tea as the adults? Obviously she's dead, so I can't say let's not meet, but it was a very scary situation nonetheless. This story happened a long time ago. Maybe 14 or 15 years ago. I'm a little fuzzy on the dates. I'd have to go back through the news articles to make sure, but I think it was 2001 or 2002. I was 11 or 12 years old at the time and living in a tiny town in the Florida Panhandle called Continent, just outside of Pensacola, Florida. I lived across the cul-de-sac from and went to school with a boy named Derek King. Derek also had a younger brother, but I can't remember his name at the moment. Derek and I obviously knew each other. He and his brother lived on and off with their father in the house across the street. I believe they were shuffled back and forth between parents for a bit. He was also in a couple of my classes in middle school. We played baseball in the same little league, so we were friendly. I always liked Derek. He was gregarious and really funny. He was also a little bit of a troublemaker. Well, more than a bit. He was always cutting up in school and being sent to the dean's office for being too loud in classes, for doing something or another to draw attention to himself. It was always fairly minor stuff though, but the sheer quantity of his antics meant that teachers all kept him on a pretty short leash. From what I can remember, his younger brother was much more quiet and reserved and not a troublemaker at all. Dean had always been loud and brash and in and out of detention to the dean's office. I know some of the people thought he was weird, but who wasn't at that age? We were 11 or 12, and everyone's a bit of an idiot when they're that young. But I admit, I liked him. It was really funny. If you can make me laugh, I'll be your friend. Or at least I'll be friendly with you. We were never close, but we chatted in class, and we played ball together, and always got along pretty well. I never had any problems with him. I had been in school with Derek for a couple of years while we were in middle school. We had a few classes together, and he had been in and out of his dad's place for a while. That was right across the street from my house, so I saw quite a bit of him, and I was pretty familiar with his antics and his sense of humor. He had a reputation, but I always considered him pretty harmless and quite a bit of fun. Around the middle of, I think 7th or 8th grade, his behavior started to get a little weirder and a lot less funny. For example, all the boys in school had a rumor that one of our teachers used to be a porn star. Total bullshit rumor, but she is the hottest teacher in school, and preteen boys will hang on to a rumor like that because it gets a lot of mileage. And well, we all enjoyed the hell out of it. But anyways, one day in this teacher's class, Derek raised his hand and straight up asked her if she was a porn star. Obviously, he got into some trouble. But it was more than that. I personally saw him using the eraser of his pencils to burn into his arms. And not just random burns, like smiley faces and stuff like that. Weird stuff. He also got in trouble at one point for using a teacher's stapler and put staples into his thigh and arms in class. Just weird stuff that threw up some red flags, but you know, we were all morons at that age and we just figured he wanted some attention, which, well, he probably did. Shortly after these incidents, Derek's house caught on fire. And it wasn't a small fire either, but it was a raging inferno. I wasn't around to see Derek's house in flames, but because I lived right across the street, I did see the aftermath, and it was pretty bad. When the firefighters got the flames out and went through the records, they found Derek's father's body. It was a mess, but it was determined that the fire hadn't been the cause of his death. He had been brutally beaten in the head, his body and the house were soaked in gasoline, and then the fire had been set intentionally to cover up the murder. Coincidentally, Derek and his brother were not in the house and were nowhere to be found. This caused quite the manhunt for the missing boys. At this point, no one was sure what had happened. Had they been kidnapped by the murderer? Had they murdered their father and set the fire themselves? Had one of them done it and taken the other? No one knew what was going on. Derek and his brother went missing for a while. I want to say about a week, but it could have been less. And the entire time, pretty much the whole community was in a panic looking for them and trying to figure it all out. Keep in mind, this is a very small little rural town. Everybody knows everybody, and the community really came together to try and find the brothers. Some time went by, and eventually Derek and his brother turned themselves into the police and admitted they had beaten their father to death with a baseball bat and started the fire to try and cover it up. After the murder and fire, they had gone into hiding with a family friend. And this was where it gets even more twisted. The family friend was a local cop named Chavis. The cop knew what they had done because they had told him all about it. He allowed them to hide out in his home. Not only that, but he began a sexual relationship with the younger brother, who at the time was 11. It's fucking disgusting. After a while, Chavis persuaded them to turn themselves into the police. Obviously, he wanted them to leave out the complicity and the fact that he was a pedophile rapist, but all that came out in the wash, I guess. To make a very long and complicated story short, the King brothers were tried and convicted as adults of the murder of their father as well as arson. Chavis the cop was tried and convicted as an accessory after the fact, destruction of evidence, perjury, rape, pedophilia, and a number of other things, and all three were packed off to prison. However, it turns out Mr. King, their murdered father, was a raging alcoholic, possibly a hard drug abuser, and abused the boys horribly, physically and mentally, and apparently kept them living in conditions that would be unacceptable for prisoners, which is, I guess, why they killed him. I heard recently that the brothers had been released from prison and that Derek is attempting to live a normal life again in a different part of the state. I even heard he's in college. I don't know if any of this is true, but I hope it is. I certainly don't condone their actions. Murder is unthinkable to me, the capital crime, as they say. But apparently their father was a monster, and they were children, truly children, both 12 or younger when this occurred. They will always have to live with what they've done. But if they do have the chance to live free lives again, I do hope that they take advantage of it and get something good done with their lives. Maybe it's wrong of me, I don't know, but I sympathize with them. I can't imagine how terrible their childhoods must have been with a monster parent physically, emotionally, and sexually abusing them. And then adult prison while still children. As for Chavis the cop, he will spend the rest of his life rotting away in prison. So, I lived down the street from, went to school with, and played sports with a couple of murderers and their monster father. I don't know if Derek will ever hear this. Odds are pretty much probably against that. On the off chance that you do, I don't ever want to meet you again, but I do wish that you and your brother have the best of what you can make of your life. I hope you can live the semblance of a normal life, because you still have quite a lot left to live of it. And if you work at it, I think you can maybe atone for your sins. And if you want any proof of this, all you have to do is look up King Brothers murder. It made national and international news. There were books written about it. It was on major television news networks and newspapers. It's very easy to find. Hey all, I don't really have much to say today, except for thanks for all the support on the last video, and anyways, I guess I'll see you next video.